This is Brading Roman Villa. A villa essentially is a farm, and this has been a farm for a long time. Even before the Romans it was a farm. And we know this because underneath your car wheels, if you've parked up in the car park, under the gravel, they found some post holes of quite a sizable Iron Age building. So we know there was an Iron Age farm here, and we know that the islanders were trading with Rome. Yeah, they.
Like a Celtic. That looks like tiny little buildings singing.
Yeah, it was an
these
Iron
tiny
Age
little
farm, and it
buildings.
became a farm with Roman-style buildings, and
Are
there were
these tiny
3
buildings?
Roman-style buildings altogether on this site.
Oh, this one.
This is a model of the one you're in, but this is the 3rd in the sequence of building of the 3 that they built.
Are these houses?
No, they're piles of tiles called pile, and they support some big flat tiles, and then in the space underneath swirls hot air. It's underfloor heating.
I've never seen what tiles are those.
So,
We don't even have that in our house.
well, they're now for the very rich.
Yeah, well, yes.
I don't know anyone who's got it.
No, that's it, yeah.
Right, the first building up, this is a whistle-stop tour through the centuries.
Yeah, no, it's...
Keen to get on, I know. But the first building up, roughly the end of the 1st century, lay along here in respect to this building. And that's the south range, like a long, low bungalow. Both the south and north are lined out in chalk. Anything Roman's under the grass, but you can, weather permitting, go all over them and see the size and shape of the rooms. So end of the 1st century, long, low building, south range. Fast forward 100 years, that's now falling down. They build again along here, the north range. Now, if that's like a long, low bungalow, this one's more like a church. It's a big aisled building, 2 stories high. Fast forward another 100 years and they built this one, end of the 3rd century. Now, these 2 had their own bathhouse, and this one never has had. So what we read is that when this went up, that's a ruin. This is 100 years old, but perfectly sound to live in. The farm workers live over here. Possibly there's a big meeting space over here. Everyone baths over here, but this one is the posh bits for the family. And it was posh, make no mistake. The mosaics are special. They were specially commissioned. We're still deciphering the story they have to tell even now. They're not run-of-the-mill ones. They're quite unique in many respects, and they are amongst the finest in Northern Europe. They cost a lot of money, and the reason for this family's wealth is because this was never just a farm. Are you all on holiday? You're not local?
Yes.
No, we're from Gloucester.
Right. So I will tell you one of the island's secrets then. Some people who live here don't know this. Right, that's a modern OS map of roughly a quarter of our island,
That's
which,
not
as you
mine.
know, is a
That's
diamond
mine.
shape with 4 points and 4 flat sides. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mine.
So what you're looking at here is the easternmost point and a flat side down to the south, and that's about a quarter of the island. Now that red cross is the villa, okay? And this is the coastline today. That's Sandown Bay. Been there?
Yeah.
Sandown Bay, Whitecliff Bay, Bembridge, St Helens. And St Helens Harbour is in a little sort of horseshoe there. But when the villa went up, that navy blue wavy wiggly line is the coastline.
Wavy wiggly.
So you can see that it was, I don't want to put my fingers in the way,
This looks like a mine.
but you can see that it was very close to the inland coastline.
This looks like a mine.
Well, it's not, and I'll tell you about that in a minute. But this was Culver Island, which is the big down with the monument on the top, was an island. We think that across there was a shingle bank caused by longshore drift, but it's still water. But look, this huge natural harbour. So they were running an import-export business. They had
It
big,
looks like
big
we-
ships coming in. Right, lads, and they were loading cargo on it that had been produced on the island, shipping it out, selling it, bringing things in from all over the Roman Empire and selling them for a profit. That's how they got rich. Righty-ho. During the time they lived in this house, they made a few changes, home improvements, the way we all do. That's a corridor, and the experts think that there was another corridor over here, but then they've changed walls about. This was a veranda, a sort of a deck open to the sea, but they decided they want another room, and it's later been walled in. That's the Romans' grand entrance. You've come in over here. And we know that there was a pillar either side of the door because you can see the remains of one as you go round. Look out for it.
Okay.
Bit more time passes and they decide they'll have some nice posh mosaic floors. So they lay down the diamond pattern in that room and the checkerboard pattern in this room. And that is all there was, if you can imagine it, at one time. Bit more money in the bank. They've decided to have something finer and posher. So they've literally cut out big squares and put in something more expensive and impressive. And particularly opposite the front door like that, you know, look at us, we've
Shows
arrived.
your wealth up to everyone.
Yeah, we can afford this on our floor, do business with us.
That would have took years and years and years.
Yes, that's a particularly fine mosaic in that room. That's the audience chamber.
That took years to
Right,
put this.
fast forward another 100 years. So we were up to the end of the third, roughly, when this went up. So roughly the end of the fourth. And they no longer lived here. Why? Well, that sign will say is after a disastrous fire. But the signs are 12 years old and due for replacement because we learn more every year.
Yeah, technically it looks
That
like
gives me the impression, I don't know about you folk, that somebody burnt the toast and the place burnt down. And that's not what the experts say happened, but there's evidence of fires here and there.
Yeah.
So what we're current thinking is, remember, it's a very wealthy place on the edge of the sea. So we think that pirates sailed up and fired the place, stole stuff, maybe took hostages, frightened the family. Nobody wants to live here. But it then had a lease of life as a sort of a mini industrial estate. So do you two have near your home somewhere where there's just shops and businesses but nobody lives?
Yeah.
Yeah? Well, that's what was going on here after the family fled. And to highlight some of that ways they adapted the building, and we'll get onto the mysterious hole in a minute. Over here, we've already talked about underfloor heating. Well, in this room in particular, instead of the slabs to walk on and have nice warm feet, they had stones with holes in, which you can see as you go around. So the room is full of smoke. Why do you think that might be? Why would they want a room full of smoke?
Is it because... Oh, smoke the meat.
Well done, yes. It may have been meat, it may have been fish from the sea, it may have been both. They were smoking. The smoking preserves it, which is also what they were doing over here with your mystery hole. That T shape is recognisable instantly to an archaeologist. It's what they call a corn dryer. And in this instance, we think they were drying out beans because we found burnt beans round and about it. Okay. So you've got a long main flue and a transverse flue. They would have had shutters inside to control the temperature, fire about here, and slabs or boards across the top, and a low constant heat, pile up the crops and dry them out, again to preserve them. If you take the water out of things like rice, the rice in your mum's cupboard is dry, isn't it? You have to put water in it to eat it. But it once had water in that's been dried out of it to preserve it. And then this room over here, this big square one, that's the Romans' dining room. They called that a triclinium. What other words can you two think of that begin with tri?
First thing, why do you need the second?
Tribarius.
What is it?
That's the name.
Right.
Triangle?
Yeah.
Triceratops?
Your mum's got triceratops, that's a good one. So what have a triangle and a triceratops got in common? What does the tri bit mean in those two words?
What is
Three.
Well done, babe.
Well, the reason they called their dining rooms a triclinium is because they had three big settees or couches. Because for some reason they thought eating laying down was a really good plan. It's not, but they thought it was. And it doesn't matter how many people were dining, they just got cosy. But they had three big couches. So in its heyday, that room had a beautiful black and white floor. The walls would have been plastered with lovely pictures on them. Okay. But now in its industrial phase, that heap of stones there that looks as if we haven't leveled the floor properly is actually a collapsed kiln. So we know they were manufacturing in that room. Probably pottery, maybe glass, maybe jewellery, but they were built. So you
like a big island.
Yeah, you can see they had little businesses going on. So, fast forward another 100 years, and this place is forgotten. It's buried under the ground. The walls wouldn't have been a lot higher than this. They would have had timber on top of them and then the roof, and the whole effect would have been quite like a Tudor building, you know, with beams infilled with plaster.
I keep thinking that this is the place that's buried.
It was buried. It was buried, and then it was dug up again. It got buried about the end of the 5th century, and it lay buried for 1,500 years, a long, long, long time. And the field it was in, a long sloping field, got to be known as Stony Field. And it was rediscovered in the 1880s, well, in 1880.
That's why it's really useful.
And the reason is interesting. Now, at that time, it's a big secret that it's under here. No one knows. But on top of it, this half roughly belonged to the Lady of the Manor, Lady Oglander, and this half roughly belonged to Farmer Munns. And they didn't know it was here. But a soldier moved into the village who knew all about Roman things, and he knew there was a building under here because he saw the farmers' children playing with stones. And he said, "Where did you get those?" And they said, "Well, my dad's got piles of them in the barn. You know, we built pigsty out of the bigger bits."
Yeah.
So what do you make of those? What do you think those are?
I think that's a bit of a mosaic,
Right.
and that might be a bit of pottery.
Right. Well, you're sort of right. That is two things. It was a bit of pottery, probably a tile, but we didn't invent recycling either. The Romans were there before us. And what they did with their broken tiles and pottery was bang it all up into bits, and you see it squared off. That's a floor tile. That's a bit of a mosaic floor like this. Yeah? And this one is very thin and very fine, and you see it's got patterns on it.
Yeah.
That was a part of a bowl or a dish or something like that, and that's something we call Samian ware. It's the most expensive and poshest tableware you could have got in Roman times, which is another evidence for why they were rich. And
Looks like
your
a piece
brother
of
has
train
got
track to me.
a piece of...
Train track.
I know what you mean, because you're looking at it like that and seeing that there's clear edges on it, but if you turn it that way up, what does it look like now?
Pottery.
Yes, well done. And you see that curve, if you sort of follow that round, you've got quite a big bowl, and that's a cooking pot. So,
Well, that's why I keep seeing them everywhere.
right.
Those bowls.
So that's how come Captain Thorpe knew there was something underneath, you see. So he said to the farmer, "Let me know if you find anything else." And the farmer did. In this area here, one snowy night, Good Friday, he was banging in a fence post for his sheep pen. Clink, won't go in any further. So he cleared the ground and found that beautiful mosaic that you're going to go and look at in a minute.
So it wouldn't go down.
It wouldn't go down because it was stopped by all the hard stones of the mosaic. So he called Captain Thorpe, and they dug a bit more up. And the upshot of the story is that Lady O, who remember owned this bit, bought up Farmer Munn's bit. Very, very sensible of her. And when she owned the lot, she got people to dig it all up and opened it as a tourist attraction, and it's been one ever since. So I told you this had a beautiful black and white floor in this room, and we know that because it was in the original 1880s excavation notes. But it's long since gone because to start with it was open to both the weather and thieves. But eventually in the early 1900s, if you turn and have a look at that long oblong concrete there with its upright girders, that's all that's left of the old cover building, which they put up in 1907, I think. They put it on top of the Roman walls, but they had different ideas. We've left that bit there because it's still part of its history.
Yes.
It was condemned in 2004, and up went this fabulous building at a cost of 3.2 million, and that brings you up to date.